Hello everyone and welcome to Burnt Toaster Productions. I'm your host, Burnt Toaster. Considering I've done a will-only run in Fable Anniversary and Fable 2, I decided to go ahead and do it for Fable 3. So, let's get to the rules. I can only defeat enemies in combat with will abilities, or in this case, the gauntlets. I can only use a weapon if a flit switch or other such item requires use of said weapon for progression of the game. I cannot use any restorative items, so health potions and food are out of the window. And then finally, I can only fall in combat 3 times. If I fall a 3rd time, the run will be considered a failure, but I'll continue until the end. And that's it for the rules. This is just a little reminder that the next video may be that big one to celebrate getting 1,000 subscribers. Of course, if something comes up between now and then, I'll let you all know. I do have another run planned in the event that I can't get through that one in time. Anyway, let's get into the run, shall we? Starting off, we just have basic normal business to attend to. You know, meeting Elise, addressing the staff, signing a petition, training with Walter, and of course trying to convince my brother to not end his subjects' lives prematurely. Average Tuesday kind of stuff. After the introduction, we have to leave to start a revolution. The good thing about this run is it starts pretty much immediately once I've grabbed the guild seal, because I get access to my first spell, Fireball. Basic, but it does the job it's meant to do. Then again, bats are hardly the best tests for combat viability. Regardless, we reach the end where I find a Cullis Gate that takes us to the Sanctuary, and from there I can visit the first place I need to go with Walter, the Dweller Camp in Mistpeak. When Walter and I get over there, due to me sticking out like a sore thumb, Walter gives me some money to get some clothes to help me fit in. After purchasing and donning said clothes, I can meet with Sabine. He has some tasks for me to fulfill, proving I'm a hero, dealing with the mercs, and convincing Brightwall to share some food with the dwellers. Simple enough. On my way to Brightwall, I have some wolves to fight. Just like bats, they're not really challenging because they're rather weak. 2 to 3 fireballs roast them like chestnuts. Still, it does allow me to get a little more comfortable using magic. Never really used will abilities throughout the trilogy, so I'm not entirely sure what to expect later on. Nevertheless, I make it to Brightwall and head to the academy, where I am to show Samuel my seal, and he is to allow me to get into the reliquary. Inside, I ran across my first flit switch, which means, technically speaking, no, you can't beat Fable 3 with only will, or only magic. However, I don't really count that as a loss because no enemy is harmed or defeated by the sword. Moving on, I get my first taste of group combat, and by that I mean it's the first combat encounter with a fair amount of enemies. Hollow men this early on are pretty easy though. I just have to charge the spell for AoE damage and let it rip. Right now, the only issue is the fact that it takes a little bit to charge the spell since I'm working with level 1 gauntlets, and these undead fellows love to put on the pressure by sprinting at me. Not only that, but the AoE version seems to kind of miss some enemies. But despite that, I don't have too many issues slinging fireballs around until there are no enemies left standing. Further in, I must use a firearm to activate the next switch, then deal with some hollow men by burning them to a crisp. I encounter the tougher variant of hollow men, which showcases the issue of charging early on. While I'm charging, I can still get damaged, and I'm kind of stuck in this position. On top of all of that, these guys can be a bit relentless. The best way to avoid damage is to create space then charge, which can be easier said than done on some occasions. After I've purified the walking bones with holy hellfire, I reach the end and can grab the music box. With the box acquired, I stop by the Road to Rule to listen to Teresa and buy a few things. Most notably the Landlord Pack, Die Pack 1, the first upgrade to the gauntlets, and the Shock Spell. When I've returned to the real world, Walter has made some progress on the merc problem. I'm to take this completely soused man's clothes, get his beard and tattoo, then sneak into the Mercenary camp. As for funds getting those 2 things, I sell some stuff at the pawnbroker, then get into my new disguise. Making my way to the Mercenary camp isn't difficult. The only thing in my way was a pack of wolves, which were obliterated by my magical fire. At the camp, I don't really faff about. I gather a few things and get on my task. Doesn't matter what I do as my cover gets blown by 2 observant mercs. Well, nothing a little fire won't solve. Something I found out during the fight with most of this camp is the fact that explosions won't hurt me when I cast an AoE version of a spell, which makes some groups of enemies incredibly easy and makes me feel a bit like a human timed explosive. Regardless, my overall strategy to deal with enemies doesn't see any drastic change. Multiple melee enemies, create distance, charge, and release to deal decent damage, then pick off the survivors. With the ranged guys, I just run up to them and use magic to cause barrels to explode. And before you know it, I have to fight Saker. Before I entered the fight though, I changed my spell to the shock spell, mostly because I wanted to potentially stun him and his helpers that come in later on. As I should have expected, it was more effective on his men. I'm gonna be honest, he and his men did a number on me numerous times. In spite of the slight worry of getting knocked out in combat this early on, eventually I've magically tased the mercenary leader into submission and spared his life. Back at the road, I nabbed the second level for my gauntlets. Time to work on that third and final task. It requires me to gather some guild seals, which is best done by completing side quests. And I do the only two that I really need to. Nothing crazy and not much in the way of combat, just gathering some chickens and performing in spectral plays. With the quests done, I just have to promise Samuel that I'll reopen the academy for everyone, then promise Sabine that I'll restore the mountain and give his people the right to live there. At the Road to Rule, I grab another die pack and the Ice Storm spell. With Sabine's tasks fulfilled, Walter wants to meet me at the monorail station close by. As I walked my way over there, I decided it was the perfect opportunity to test out my new spell. Ice Storm isn't bad, especially as a purely AoE damage type of spell, but I wanted something with a level of versatility, so I switched back to Fireball. Anyway, I make it to the station, watch the monorail fall, then get down to the bottom with Walter to investigate what happened. Hobbs happened. Although I suppose for the passengers, it's pure rotten luck. Good thing for me is the basic little fellows seem to fall pretty easily to fire. Honestly, even the large hordes were pretty easy to deal with. But to be fair, I've always heard magic in Fable 3 was overpowered, though we'll get to exactly why a bit later. Thanks to the introduction of tougher Hobbs, my tactics slightly changed. It involved casting the charged AoE version for the fodder, then charging to focus on the tougher ones since they were the only ones left. Worked out rather well. With the magical Hobbs, it stayed roughly the same, though I had to be slightly quicker to target the caster as it'll continue to spawn in undead Hobbs. Would you call them hollow Hobbs instead of hollow men? Skella Hobbs? I'm done trying to coin a term for the little bony boys. Even though I have immolated most of the Hob population here, Walter and I still have more to go through. A basic little arena with 3 magic Hobbs in the center spawning in some bony compatriots. The bony boys fall pretty easily, and so do the 3 in the center. With that, Teresa congratulates me, and I'm free to spin some seals. Remember how I said magic is overpowered? You're about to see why. If you haven't played this game before or messed with magic, it's the ability to spell weave. Or, in other words, have 2 spells in one cast. I actually don't hate the general idea. It's a nice concept. Some spells weave rather well together where they become a harmony of the two, other it's just the 2 spells simultaneously. I also grabbed the Vortex spell. Back in the real world, Walter gives a Hob a heart attack, and I go back to the Sanctuary to weave Vortex and Fireball together. It allows me to cast Fire Tornadoes. Our whole reason for being here is to get to Mourningwood. I still find that name to be unfortunate. There are some soldiers stationed at a fort that could prove invaluable for the revolution. All I have to do is help them survive the night. I start that out by manning a mortar against hollow men. Pretty easy stuff. Afterwards, they breach the gate and I get to give them a taste of my fiery squalls of wind. I will say I enjoyed watching skeletons get tossed around and set ablaze. Sadly, despite my best efforts, Jamie ended up falling in combat, and I of course avenge him via magical means. Eventually, we beat them back, and then I must fight Lieutenant Simmons. You would think having Fireball and Vortex together would be perfect for this fight, and as far as crowd control goes, yeah, it works beautifully. However, I may have gotten a little overconfident and got myself knocked out. You'd also think I'd learn by now, but no. Overconfidence seems to be my #1 killer. Even with that setback, I rise up and burn my enemies with a most fiery wrath. Until I switch Vortex out with Ice Storm for a spell combo I like to call Icy Hot. Now that the recently reanimated have been put back into the ground, I can promise Swift that he'll be in charge of the Royal Army. Since I'm now on the road to rule, I grab the next level for my gauntlets. Once I've returned from my otherworldly trip, Walter and I can get on over to Barrowstone. In Barrowstone, Walter knows of a resistance group that is operating in the industrial area. While making our way over to meet them, Reaver does his thing, which is threatening workers with prizes. Those prizes being bullets, of course. When we do make it to their hideout, they almost shoot us. That is until Paige walks in and tells me what I need to do, and that is to help some people out with their problems. Before I can wander off, I have to go to the road. Since I was there, I grabbed the Force Push spell. Now that I have spell weaving, a mix of 2 damage spells might not be bad, especially since Force Push, when charged at higher levels, will knock most enemies down. Anyway, after grabbing my new spell and getting some customization done, I had a little bug I hadn't encountered before. I was unable to start any quest because the dialogue was just lost in the void. So I had to restart the game. At least that worked. The first quest I did for this area was kidnapped, someone was forcefully taken, and I have to help get them back. The best part is it gives me a chance to try out my mix of Fireball and Force Push against some mercenaries. And yeah, it works pretty well. A bit better than anticipated, really. Now that the man behind the whole kidnapping is cornered, I have to go and rescue Laszlo's girlfriend. It's not difficult, Hobbs don't really stand a chance. At the end of it all, I tell her to stay with the guy. He did contract me to help him out, so yeah. With that done, I haven't mentioned it yet, but I decided to aim for the good ending by managing property. There's nothing necessarily against it in the rules, so I figured why not. When I'm done buying up property like it's going to disappear, I head off to my next quest, the game. Nothing crazy really. There are some easy to defeat enemies, wolves, hollow men, those demonic chickens, and Hobbs. Naturally, at the end of the quest, I have to use the sword I found to take the Baron down, and considering he isn't a living or undead entity, I wouldn't say it's against the rules. He is quite literally a little painted piece of wood, and I can't keep the sword. With that quest finished, I still needed some more seals, so I went out to do the Peace, Love, and Homicide quest. The job is simple. I just have to go take care of someone. There's no resistance in the form of guards, and the way over there is just littered with hollow men. When I get over to the village, the guy tanked a decently well-charged Fireball Force Push mix, which I feel the need to somewhat respect. Regardless, he's dealt with rather swiftly, and I can return to the quest giver for my prize of 15 seals. Thanks to the combination of the quest and fighting off hollow men, I only need part of 1 seal, so I take the final insult quest. Nothing to really talk about. I'm finally done helping the average person out and can talk to Paige again. A group of resistance members went into Reaver's mansion and haven't reported back, which means Paige and I need to get dressed for a party. On the way to the party, I had the pleasure of cleaning the area of mercenaries. Wasn't too tough, though a couple of them got wise to my magic and backed up just enough to be out of range. Didn't stop me from targeting them though. Less soldiers of fortune running around, I get to the mansion. Instead of espionage and intrigue, Paige and I must fight in an arena of sorts. Honestly, nothing to really talk about. Magic in Fable 2 and 3 is rather broken for combat once you get it high enough. The Hobbs fell into the abyss, hollow men were obliterated with ease, the Mercs put up a bit of a fight because of the big guy with flaming fists, the Sand Furies were tossed around like hacky sacks, and the Balverines didn't survive for too long. Though I wasn't able to consistently knock them over like all of the rest. When all of the fighting is done, Reaver walks off and Kid is finally freed. Afterwards, Paige wants me to promise to end all of the exploitation of the average person. Then I get called to the road again. Though at least I get to upgrade my magic once more, so I'm not really going to complain. Some more property management later, I head out to see what exactly the news is. Well, Swift was found to be a traitor and promptly executed in front of a crowd. Thankfully, he did give us intel on where to find more people willing to fight, Aurora. The only issue is it's across the ocean. However, Walter did say we could always appropriate a vessel to sail over there. Well, seeing as that's probably the only solid plan we have, we go for it. I go with Ben to see if we can procure it through joining the ranks, but Ben isn't exactly the pinnacle of being convincing, so I had to start casting. Lugan's elite guards don't do so well at being incinerated and pushed around, even more so when there are powder kegs nearby. Some guard roasting and throwing later, we make it to a ship that'll take us to Aurora. We sail out to a new country ready to make some more allies, and damn it, Logan, you sank my battleship. In all seriousness, Walter and I were luckily not separated, but we do have to go through the spooky, scary temple. Inside said temple isn't much, unless you count shadow people and some eldritch abomination as a lot, which if you do, fair enough. Anyway, the shadows are pretty easy to deal with. A single hit from any damage source is enough to take them out. With magic having AoE capabilities, it performed rather well. Eventually, though, Walter ends up getting yoinked by the crawler, which means I get to fight more shadow people. At least they're easy to purge from this world. So I'm running and banishing the demons that haunt this place later. I find Walter again, though he's a bit indisposed at the moment. Well, at least this time around, this fight won't be so bad. Apparently, these dark beings are weak to fire. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I seem to be dropping them pretty fast, so either way, it doesn't really matter. The dark minions weren't really all that bad to fight against after the shadows, more than likely due to Fort's push knocking them over while fire burned them. Unless I charged it a little bit more and they'd pretty much just explode. As for the Sentinel, it was substantially easier than the previous video. I never want to spend so much time in one area like that again. All of the creatures of the void now banished from whence they came, I can lead Walter out of here, or at least try until he inevitably collapses and I must leave him behind. Not like it goes much better for me as I end up collapsing myself. The only difference is Ben and Kaylin find me first, and eventually find Walter. After I'm nursed back to health, Kaylin tells me to look around her city. There's only one place I need to go, so I find the mourning husband, listen to him, and return to Kaylin. Before she's willing to join us in our fight against my brother, she wants me to promise to rebuild Aurora and let it properly become part of the kingdom. Once the promise is sealed, I get called back to the road again, and this time I purchase the blade spell. Somewhere around halfway through this run, I looked online for what spells people thought synergized pretty well. And one combo I saw was Blades and Vortex. I wanted to see what the hype was all about, and so I used it during the fight to take the throne. I will admit, there was something satisfying about watching Logan's guards get thrown around like ragdolls and having magical blades pierce them like pincushions. It was kind of funny. And to be honest, they didn't stand much of a chance regardless. Though I was having a hard time keeping up with the timing of the spell. I think I might have something wrong with my brain. Despite that, we fight our way forward and into the castle, capturing Logan, and finally I'm crowned King of Albion. My first action was to continue buying real estate. In order to easily get the money needed for the best ending, the state has to control both the housing market and the economy, and charge extra on everything from rent to daily necessities. It's a slightly slow process, but one that doesn't exactly require personal intervention, besides having to repair buildings every now and again. To pass the time, I started doing some minor side quests, which did help pass the time a fair bit, but I ended up getting bored of that and started progressing the game. I had the squad deal with Logan, got the last level needed for my magic, kept my promises, bettered the lives of my subjects, got into debt several times but ended up replacing the money in the treasury once I had enough, and any combat I got into wasn't all that difficult to deal with. I went back to Fireball and Force Push simply because it felt like it defeated enemies a little bit faster, and that's really about it. For the last bit of the money I needed, I just sat around off camera for a number of hours. Mostly so this video isn't a pain to edit, and also because sitting around doing nothing makes for terrible content. By the end, I amassed more than enough gold to save everyone and keep all of my promises. Well, the time has finally come to thwart off the darkness that wants to end all life in the world. Thanks to the magic upgrades I've gotten, the battle isn't really bad at all. Nothing could really stand a chance. Shadows are weak by default, the dark minions would more often than not get blown to bits, and not even the sentinels could withstand the fury of my magic. That is until the final fight. Granted, the fight was a fair bit quicker than the last time because I was able to actually deal some damage, though I couldn't always charge up any devastating spells. The final fight requires a level of mobility. I cut it close for about half the fight from trying to charge a spell, so it was a lot of dodging and basic casting. But right at the very end, I was able to charge up a strong blast of magic and finally defeat the crawler-possessed Walter. The only downside is that it cost Walter his life. And with that, the run is finished. Having played through all 3 games with only magic, I felt like this one was the easiest of them. Probably because there's no worrying about upgrading health and focus can be maintained on getting more spells and increasing magical strength. Anniversary or the last chapters is probably the most balanced, even though magic can still be rather broken, and that's thanks to having a mana bar. But at the same time, mana doesn't really matter when you're filthy rich and able to buy all of the will potions you'll ever need. Still, it was decently fun. I liked being able to spell weave, despite the fact that I found Force Push and Fireball to be my favorite combination personally. A bit boring, sure, but it was effective. Anyway, thank you all for watching. If you made it this far, consider liking, sharing, subscribing, and hitting that little bell to have a slightly higher chance of being notified when I upload. And of course, if you have a run suggestion, slap it down in the comments. I definitely can't promise I'll get to it immediately, as I have a fairly large video planned, but I'll get to it when I can. This has been Burnt Toaster from Burnt Toaster Productions, and I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.